Emily, I work for The Wheel. Thank you. And I am delighted to be joined by a host of fantastic guest speakers for today's events. So we are joined by Liz Kelly from Include, Mark Guerin from Lergus, Brendan Mulry from Irish Rural Link, and Katrina Whelan from the National Adult Literacy Agency. So before we dive in, I just want to do some quick Zoom housekeeping. So I'm just going to give you the standard reminder to remain on mute as appropriate, just to avoid background noise. As you are aware, we are recording today's event, so if you do not want to appear in said recording, feel free to keep your camera switched off. My colleague Christina is here to provide tech support, along with my colleague Matthew Norman. So if you have any tech issues with Zoom, feel free to message them and they will do their best to sort you out. You can also feel free to use the chat to say hello to us and let us know where you're joining us from today. And we will share the recording in a follow-up email along with all of the slides and resources and other links in a follow-up email that will go out later this week. So that is the housekeeping done. And then onto the agenda. So here's what you can expect for today's session. So we're going to kick things off with a poll via Menti just to see where the attendees are in terms of developing your own digital strategy for your organization. Then we're going to go have a consultation in breakout rooms for about 15 minutes just to kind of delve further into maybe the challenges and opportunities around digitalizing your organization and creating digital projects for your community. After the breakout rooms, we're going to go into our panel, which will look at developing inclusive digital initiatives and projects. So that will feature Brendan, Mark, and Katrina. We'll have some time for some question and answer session with the panelists. And then Liz Kelly from Include is going to take us through the digital landscape in Ireland and a roadmap to digitalizing your organization. So that's the plan for this afternoon. Right, so jumping right in with the Menti poll, we've got 3 questions for you to answer. They're just kind of basic yes or no questions. So you can access the Menti poll by scanning this QR code. You can also join it at www.menti.com and use the code 79669243. So Christina will also pop that link in the chat so that you can access it there. So I'll just give people a moment to scan the QR code if they would like to. And then I will share the Menti results so we can see them coming in. Okay. So, right. So our first question is, do you have a digital strategy for your organization? So far, just laughing at the gifts. So far, got 13 with no and 10 with yes. So, all right, even enough spread so far. So hopefully, there'll be enough food for thought for those who haven't started and for those who are kind of looking to expand or develop their digital strategies or maybe kind of get moving on them. Okay, so then the next question is, where are you on this journey? Can you rate it on a scale of 1 to 5? So 1 being, we've just started this, maybe it's not fully off the ground yet. And then 3 would be kind of, we have some things up and running. 4 is pretty advanced. And then 5 is maybe it's all in place and you're flying it. And you're maybe just looking at taking it to the next level. Or maybe just looking to impart some of your wisdom to those of us who maybe need to develop ours further. So great. So a lot of people have just started. There's some people that are kind of making good progress. So good. So we've got kind of a lot of beginner and intermediate people on their digital strategy journey. So that's good. Okay, and then our last question is, do you feel that there's support for community groups regarding their digital journey? And I guess by digital journey, we mean sort of developing a digital strategy or kind of working on digitalizing their organization. So yes, there are a lot of supports and options to choose from. Yeah, I somewhat feel like it could be improved. And I'm not sure, I'm not aware of the available supports, or no, I don't feel that there is support. Okay, so looks like the majority of people are not sure. So, I mean, that's good that you're here today. So hopefully we can kind of shed some light on the supports that are out there. So this will be open for a while if people need to kind of revisit it, but I'm going to stop sharing that for now. Okay, so thank you very much for contributing to that. I think that provides some good context, especially for our panelists and our speakers today, to things that they might kind of want to keep in mind or touch on as we move through the different parts of today's session. So now I'm just going to share the questions that we have for the breakout rooms before we do that. And just bear with me. Okay. So the discussion questions are, what are the main barriers to digitalization? What are the priorities that you have in ensuring that your digital strategy is inclusive? Do you see any opportunities in digitalization and how it could transform your work? And what further supports do you need to progress or start your digitalization journey? So don't feel like you need to write any of these down. So as I mentioned, each, or maybe I didn't mention this yet, but each breakout room is going to have a designated note taker. So that will be one of the speakers today. So they're going to take notes on all of these questions and your answers and your input via Padlet. So you don't feel like you have to write these down. So they will be there kind of moderating and facilitating the sessions. So what I would say is that we only have 15 minutes in these kind of consultation groups, so I wouldn't spend a lot of time kind of introducing yourself and talking about your organization. I would encourage you to just sort of dive in to giving your input around those 4 different questions. And we would really encourage everybody to get involved. So the kind of purpose of this consultation is that it'll help us sort of to see the gaps and the obstacles facing organizations in the sector when it comes to developing digital strategies and rolling out their digital strategy. And then we're having a follow-on event on the 30th of October where we're sort of present the findings of this consultation and address kind of the main trends and challenges and help to signpost and kind of address like where the supports are. So that is my piece. Please recording again. Great. So what we're going to do now is the panel portion of the event. So I am going to be moderating that. So I'll just give an introduction to our 3 panelists. So with us today, we have Mark Guerin. Mark is the, sorry, I'm just looking at everybody's bio here, is the Support and Development Officer for ePalay at Lergus. So Lergus is the Irish National Agency for the Erasmus Plus funding program for education, youth training and sport. And ePalay is the electronic platform for adult learning in Europe. So Mark has been the ePalay Ireland coordinator since June 2023 and has previously worked in the tourism, culture and heritage sector. We are also joined by Brendan Mulry. So Brendan is the EU Projects Officer for Irish Rural Link. So Irish Rural Link represents locally based rural groups in disadvantaged and marginalized rural areas at local, national, and EU level. So Brendan has a lot of experience in European project management, particularly in the area of adult and community education. And Irish Rural Link have recently been partners in 2 Erasmus Plus funded projects with a digital skills focus. So I'm sure we'll be hearing more about those projects momentarily. And then we also have Katrina Whelan, who is the Acting Communications Advocacy and Outreach Manager in NALA. So NALA is the National Adult Literacy Agency. They're a charity committed to making sure that people with unmet literacy and numeracy needs have access to learning opportunities and can fully take part in society. So Katrina has worked in NALA since 2017. She previously worked on the Right On platform that supported over 11,000 learners to receive over 42,000 QQI awards at levels 2 and 3. So welcome to all of our panelists. So Brendan, I am going to start with you. And my first question for you is, what is Irish Rural Link's experience in delivering digital inclusion projects? So can you tell us a bit about some of your past and current digital projects?
Yeah, well, Irish Rural Link has been in existence for more was we right. We sent We sent 10,000 postcards out to community groups around the country, and it got people, if you're living in a rural area and you want broadband, send in a postcard to the Department of Communications. It was effective, and we like to think, you know, at that time we were making the case that broadband should be like electricity. And there wasn't much people at that time kind of making the same case, or wasn't seen as realistic. We now know we did that campaign and then we moved on, but look, we're proud as to where we're at now and the small little part that we had in being part of that conversation, which isn't that long ago, but at the same time feels like a million years ago. A lot of the stuff we do nowadays in terms of the EU projects, they all have a kind of a digital remit. No, Mark will be probably talking about this, but digitalisation is a priority for the European Union, so it's a priority for their projects. So our applications kind of, you know, we're conscious of that, and we've developed a number of kind of projects the last number of years that were funded through Erasmus. One was looking at digital entrepreneurship for women. And one that we're just finishing now was looking at rural micro enterprises and their digital needs. And essentially, look, micro enterprises, that's companies with less than 9 employees. They're the companies that are struggling most with making the digital transition, simply because they're always going to have to prioritize the busy client, the pressure day to day. They're not going to have the resources for an IT system. So what we did was we researched that around Europe. We discovered that in global terms, we're probably twice as good as America, which kind of came as a surprise to me. And we're kind of on a par with Europe in terms of rural digitalization, which is, there's still room to improve, because even up to like a couple of years ago, maybe 1 in 4 rural these micro businesses didn't have a digital strategy, or weren't, you know, if they had a Facebook page, they never used it, or if they had a website, it wasn't necessarily a website coming soon sign. So we don't see as many as those as we used to, but they're still a good bit behind. So we developed a training program really to help those rural businesses. It's online. It's called Micro 2 Digital. What you'll find when you go into that, or assuming all 50 of you will be jumping on it when you finish here, but what you'll find if you were to look at it is there's a lot of emphasis really on, you know, soft skill development, more so than technical stuff, because we know that a digital strategy is not about becoming, say, a technical mechanic. There's a better phrase, but that's what's in my head. It's more about kind of developing a culture in your small little business that this digitalization is important. That if you're the small hairdressers or small social enterprise that isn't, you know, using digital tools, it could be fine in very good times, but when a recession comes and say you're a contractor or whatever it is, the business with a digital footprint will be more successful. So in that course, there's a lot on change management. There's a lot on communications and the ability to tell stories and that. And there's less on how do you set up a Facebook page, or how do you do this and that. Look, in there as well, there's data protection, data management, all that stuff. The other projects that we're, in terms of digital stuff, we've started this year a Breeding Waders environmental project. And digitalization, that's really to restore these birds that there aren't so many left. It's a big project, and digital is very much at the heart of it in terms of GPS mapping where these birds are, where they aren't, where the nests are, all that. From my own perspective, just this summer, we started a farm safety, child farm safety project. And key to that is we're developing video game app for young kids to learn about farm safety through playing a video game. Hasn't really been done before, and we'd hope, it's a digital thing, and it hadn't even crossed my mind really to think, yeah, that's definitely digital. Other things we've done, look, we've been involved in our Horizon projects as well, where we feel it's very important to kind of showcase kind of best practice in rural enterprise and rural social enterprise. Because if you can't see it, it's very kind of hard to do it. I think anyway, for me, for somebody who's less creative. So if you can see it, you can kind of see how it might fit for you. So we developed digital libraries for kind of obscure different businesses or new models. Like for instance, we have a sheep farm that's a new agri-tourism business out in Connemara that's well signposted, and it just completely uses digital. We also have Kieran Malouly's what's it called? Loch Ree. It's the lake there anyway, beside up in Longford, and he has a whole ecotourism that brings people with disabilities out onto the lake.
Oh,
And it's well known, but it's completely dependent on digital face, reaching people through that way. So they have tours coming in from England all over, and it just simply couldn't exist before. In terms, that's kind of really the sort of stuff we're doing. The big difference for Irish Rural Link is we're a national organisation.
yeah.
It used to have most of the staff living within 10, 20 miles of Moat, where our office is. Now most of the staff live all over the country and come up to Moat maybe once or twice a week. And it just means that I'm in Galway, near Tuam. We've people in Cork, we've people in Donegal. We're all on teams. We're all kind of working as well as, if not better, than if we were in a busy office all day.
Yeah.
So that's, as an organization, that's something that's kind of working really well with us. And obviously as well, look, COVID kind of kick-started or brought this on for us as an organization, like everybody else. It probably brought it on maybe 5 or 10 years. So I like to kind of think that the digital, we're 2024 now, without COVID, we're probably 5 years ahead of where we would be, even though Teams and all that's not Teams, but Zoom and all that was there for years. People just weren't using it.
Mm-hmm.
But everybody, look, obviously is now. We just want to make sure we stay on top of it. So look, they're the kind of day-to-day stuff. The biggest one, I just forgot to mention it there, really was we had a huge Getting Citizens Online project that ran for 10 years, funded through the Department of Communications. It's now finished, but what that did was it brought citizens who were out in communities, in nursing homes, in your community centre, in pubs in some cases, farmers and marts, and it, showed them how to use screens. It showed them how to get online, how to do their banking, how to do, like we linked with AIB for that. We linked with the Department of Agriculture to set up dummy accounts and dummy bank accounts with the AIB. We know that that was a heavily resourced project because it had a huge amount of tutors, and it was, sitting with a 90-year-old in a nursing home showing them how to do a Zoom call. We want to get back to that stuff, because really, if you can go on YouTube and you have that level, you can learn an awful lot yourself. But if you're like my 85-year-old mother, you need somebody sitting beside you to just walk you through the steps. So that's something we're very, very kind of keen to get funding back again and get going again, because it worked and reached 9,000 people. So I'm conscious of time. I don't want to overstep. I know we have.
No, I think that was a really good kind of overview of the kinds of digital projects that you're delivering for your community members, and how digitalization has been hugely beneficial to Irish Rural Link as well. And it just kind of shows sort of like the breadth of things that can be delivered through sort of digital initiatives. So it's not just about, as you said, teaching people to use Facebook or Zoom, but also kind of like moving your services online and to like digital platforms so that more people can access them around the country, that kind of thing. So
Certainly. It's like for social enterprises, digital is essential for identity. So if you're a social enterprise and you want to separate yourself from, say, a charity or perceptions that might be there out there, and you reach the masses through social enterprise, or sorry, through social media or your website or whatever. So it's hugely important to messaging as much as reaching people. Like for instance, at Meals on Wheels in the States, every Meals on Wheels, or we run the Meals on Wheels network. In the States, every one of them will have a click here to donate button.
Yeah.
In Ireland, only less than half of organizations would even have a social media presence.
Yeah.
Or so it's things like that, and learning from what's abroad, so it's very, very important. And it's probably one of the cheaper things less resourced organizations can do the whole social media and the whole, digital stuff,
Yeah.
particularly with organizations like Include and that. You can do an awful lot more now than you could even think about doing 10 years ago. So,
Yeah. And I'm
um,
sure that's something that Liz will probably touch on in
yeah,
her
yeah.
training later. But Katrina, I might go over to you now, just so obviously digital transformation and digitalization are really important topics for us in the community sector. But I guess what's our role in driving inclusion in this space, and why is it so important?
Yeah, thanks, Emily. And it was interesting in our breakout group. One of the things that came up as one of the priorities was about having a strategy that is inclusive, that would consider, people's range of abilities, and that came through as being a really important thing and part of any digital strategy. So what I'd say is that it's in everyone's interest to create digital solutions that support everyone, particularly those who may be marginalised or disadvantaged. So in NALA, as you mentioned, we're the National Adult Literacy Agency, and we're an independent charity making sure that people with unmet literacy, numeracy and digital literacy needs can fully take part in society. And as part of that, we work towards the Solace Adult Literacy for Life strategy, which looks particularly at groups that are already facing challenges. So we want to make sure that everyone's voice is heard, to promote equitable access to resources, to opportunities and support. And yes, I suppose in it's really everybody's role to help make sure that we work with people from diverse backgrounds to make sure that they gain confidence, empowering individuals to become self-sufficient and active members of society. We just had an event this morning for students in the Ashling Hotel, and we're delighted to have Mick Clifford, the journalist, addressing the group, talking about everyone's right to vote. And his point was that, we're so lucky in our society to have that ability that everybody can contribute. And I would take that principle and say, yes, and in the same way, it's everybody's right to make sure that we help others, because that inclusion is going to be essential for social justice, addressing imbalances that could lead or amplify inequality. It'll help to create better understanding between people, so that everybody feels valued. And by working together in that way, we're bringing a variety of perspectives and ideas to the fore, which is going to be for the betterment of everyone.
Perfect. That kind of leads me nicely to my question for Mark. So we're talking a lot about kind of like making sure that no one is is left behind in sort of the digital transformation. So, and that's obviously a big priority for the European Commission. So what's the Commission doing to ensure that no one is left behind in the just transition?
Well, I think one of the things with the Commission, first of all, is like they're not providing all of the solutions. They're facilitating the work that's going into it, and they are kind of like leading kind of certain priorities. You know, putting focus on like digital skills training, but it's actually the individual kind of organizations within communities that are doing the work. It's a thing of inviting everyone to the table. So they're looking at the digital skills training, making sure that there's an accessible digital infrastructure, which Brendan was talking about earlier on as well. And you're kind of like is facilitating conversations around that, but as well offering kind of supports. The public awareness campaigns is something else as well, because you have this idea that to invite the people into this space, they have to be aware of it. They have to know what's going on within the communities. I think we've gone past the point where organizations, and NGOs are doing their work. It's not an arm around the homework anymore. Everyone is sharing their resources. And I think that's one of the amazing things about like the Erasmus programs, is that the product of the programs and the projects that are being done are open sourced and are there for everyone. So when you take the steps onto like kind of working towards your strategy or the solutions or the space that you need to get to, it's being aware of the work that's already been done ahead of you, so that you're not wasting resources and wasting time. But it's also keeping that connection between the community members all across Europe, that they can engage with each other. Obviously through networks like yourselves, the Wheel, like through the Apale platform and eTwinning. they're also supporting not just in the community side of things, but the digital transition within industries as well. Which is important, kind of that it's an approach that's all across the board. You know what I mean? That every kind of aspect are being involved in that. And then to include everyone, of course, you have to look at their inclusive kind of policies and their framework for that to make sure that no one is left behind. We had an event here yesterday in the Alergus offices with the National Learning Network came in, and they had their learners with them as well. And the learners, two great young guys, 19 years of age, who were talking about the tools that they use that allow them to engage and allow them to deliver and then to share their knowledge. So making sure, that everyone has a voice within that space. But it mostly comes down to the collaboration aspect of it. I think that is the most important thing. We cannot, like, I grew up, at a time kind of going where, like, yes, Ireland was part of Europe. We saw that, but we felt at the time, very much kind of on the outside of it. So this idea then came in that, okay, well, what can we gain from Europe? What can we learn from Europe? But I really think that's a very narrow way of looking at it, because there's so much incredible work being done in Ireland that it's also about us being ready to share the knowledge and the experience that we have, and appreciating, acknowledging the wealth of the work that we've already done. Like Brennan said earlier on, we're top tier in so many aspects. We're far ahead of so many other countries, and it's getting comfortable acknowledging that, and then being at the table and working with other people across Europe.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you for that, Mark. Katrina, I might go back to you. So Mark kind of touched on something there about like different kind of learners needing sort of different tools in order to kind of engage with sort of with digital projects and digital initiatives. So I guess a lot of people know about things like screen readers, but are there other kind of like more overlooked accessibility pieces that people forget about?
I think it often can be starting with the very simple things that are right there in front of us, actually. So knowing that the EU Accessibility Act 2025 is happening, I think that's bringing great awareness to people about inclusion, universal design and accessibility. And even though we could go very high tech into different tools that are available, there's so much already there, say in Microsoft Word, like using the accessibility checker. I would say that it's up to everyone to make sure that they know how to use that. And I'd say it's as important as knowing how to change font or changing margins. And the tech companies are doing an awful lot in terms of improving those kind of accessibility tools. They're already built into the software that we use every day. But even things like using plain English, keeping sentences short and direct, avoiding acronyms, using toolkits like from the National Disability Authority's Customer Communications Toolkit for services to the public, using that universal design approach, that will make sure that the document that you're writing, if it uses that as input and plain English, then that's getting it right, so that then when it's used by people using screen readers, it's accessible for everyone. And yeah, I think also how we work with people. So I'm very interested in the e-learning provider that we work with, D2L, there in Canada. They work with a company called Fable, which is a team of people with disabilities who test software to make sure that it's compliant in Canada. Also in Ireland, we have Sinead Burke, who we had recently speak at one of our events for our e-learning platform. She's the founder of Tilting the Lens, who's worked with Gucci, Vogue, and so on, looking at reframing fashion, creating accessible nightlife. So, I think we can do a lot more in terms of how we work with people outside of even going, as I say, high tech, making sure that we are getting the basic things right from the start.
Yeah. And I guess, Mark, so Brendan talked a bit about some of their Erasmus Plus funded projects that were around kind of developing digital supports and digital tools. Do you have any sort of other examples of projects that you're aware of that kind of promoted digital transformation in our communities, or that kind of like standout sort of examples aside from Brendan's?
Yeah, but that's the thing, like kind of it is amazing, like you know, when we within the office, like we will share and go, have you seen this, and that this is being done, this is being tackled, and it's amazing then because we, like with a palette, we get to showcase that, as I said. But yeah, it's so easy to kind of like put our hands on some of the stuff that's being done. Let me see here. I took down some examples of it. So Digital Empower Her, so there's a H in brackets before the ER. That's been done through the Ballymun Job Centre, and that's a partnership project. So they're working with 5 partners from Italy, Germany, Sweden, Spain, and Ireland. And what they're looking at is like a guidance approach to encouraging adult women's lifelong learning and their skills development, their resilience, and access to opportunities, you know, to lead them kind of to success in whatever individual kind of directions they're going in. So they were awarded to do that, and to work with like 4 other partners on that was a funding of 250,000 for them to carry out that work. You know, and again, the products of that then, when it's completed, are made available to everyone. So they're doing the work, but then we all get to benefit from that. It's not behind, you know, a paywall. You know, it's accessible to people. So that's a great one. There's another one then that's Digital Upbringing, which is Mead Partnership with 5 partners who are Romania, Hungary, the Netherlands, Croatia, and Cyprus. And again, it's another €250,000 euro funded partnership project, and that's looking at supporting parents and educators to help their children to develop their digital skills. And it really takes it back to the basics of going, like, well, what do you do before you your child gets a digital identity? You know, what are the things as a parent? Just very simple kind of basic ideas that you should know. Listen, I'm 2 teenagers who know far more than me in so many areas, you know, but the idea is that you at least have an understanding of where they are. And then the next stage on from before they get online is, you know, before they get access to social media, you know, before they start kind of using those. And while we say that's like 13 plus is for the majority of the platforms, we're not naive. We know that some people, it's just a case of, you know, changing a date of birth on a you know, on a phone for someone to get access to that. And then after their children get access to social media, what are the things that you should do and continue to kind of be vigilant and aware of? And I think open communication is you know, one of the most important things with that. But it's making sure that child safety features are enacted on these programs and on these platforms. Now they were 2 kind of quite large ones there, so I'm going to look for like a smaller one. Yeah, there's a great one there, which is Women Connecting Europe, and it facilitates social professional inclusion of migrant women by empowering them through digital online learning, professional and personal development. And that's just a single Irish organisation working with a Greek partner. And it was a short-term project of 30,000 that's funded. And of course, with that, like, it's not match funding, and, you know, you're getting, you know, 60-70% of that up front, and then the remainder of that on completion of it. So it's that, but the supports that go into developing these programs with Lurgus, by turning up at these in-person events, which we talked about in the breakout room, where you're sitting in a room with, you know, your peers and your colleagues from other organizations and bouncing ideas around, you know. That really, there's so many great examples. I could literally not stop for 24 hours talking about the projects.
No, but again, it's just interesting to see like that there's so many different ways that you could go with like a digital inclusion project. And it's also great that it's not just kind of like nonprofit organizations and academics developing these kind of tools. It's like you are developing them, but you oftentimes are building and piloting with your stakeholders so that they can feed back into the design of the project kind of outputs and have their say as well.
But the other thing as well is, like, if you're not sure and you don't know about kind of putting so many resources against a project like that, you know, again, a 6, 12, 18-month project, then you have the option of these kind of the mobilities, kind of those projects where you're literally sending staff or learners, let's say, and that can be like non-formal, informal, formal education, sending them off to do job shadowing, to look at what other people are doing, inviting experts over here to come into your space, you know, or going off and doing a course, and just a short-term commitment like that before you put resources against it.
Yeah, so kind of a chance to test the waters.
Yeah, yeah. But again, it's before you even engage in that, as just kind of
Yeah.
being on the platforms, engaging, having conversations, turning up to events, you know what I mean, and having those conversations. We did that event recently with yourselves over there on Cork Street, and it was amazing. Like kind of we kind of sat back, and Mary from Dalco's gave all the Erasmus information. We barely had to speak, but that was from a beneficiary having years of experience and insight. Um, they're probably the best spokespeople for the
Yeah.
programs.
Yeah, spreading the gospel of Erasmus plus.
Yeah. And the downs, and on the bits that are tough as well. Like it's not all plain sailing, but the ultimate payoff is very much worth it.
Yeah. And Brendan, just I guess back to you then, like what kind of opportunities or challenges have you kind of experienced like coming out of these sort of digital inclusion projects that you guys have been delivering?
Well, look, I guess the first thing with applying for any of this funding, there is an element of a lottery to every application you put in. So if you put in an application to Erasmus, Mark will explain the chances of success, I think is 1 in 5 or something like that. Well, it depends on which one you go for, of course.
Yeah.
So Mark, you'll jump in on that. But pretty much, you're talking a couple of 100 hours of work, people in different countries, and there's no, that's one of the bigger challenges I find in terms of actually getting an application over the line. And also the fact, you have to have, it has to be evidence-based, it has to, you have to put resources into it. But that's just the nature of the thing. So that's, in terms then of actually delivering the projects, like they're resource dependent in terms, we'll say the getting citizens online. The only way that worked for us was to go out into communities, to put little notes in church newsletters, to sit outside marts, to literally, ring a nursing home and say, look, are there people there who want to know? So that's resource dependent, it's time dependent. And you're also hitting a kind of a cultural barrier. Like I kind of refer back to my mother again. I got her a laptop at Christmas and she's still fighting opening it. And if she had it, she'd keep in touch better with her grandkids, or she'd, it would open up the world a little bit to her in ways she doesn't really even know that she can. And she's completely clued into everything, but it's just there's a gap there. Computers are scary. I can break them by looking at them, sort of thing. Now I know that's changing, and I think really for anybody under the age, can I even say it? But look, for people over the age of 80, you're still going to be disadvantaged digitally. And for us, we like the Meals on Wheels and things, that cohort is hidden, and they probably need digital tools more than any other. They need help more than any other particular group. So that's a frustration. Obviously, kind of, I was just thinking there afterwards. We know the broadband is coming, and that's, we'll say, solved. But post that in 2030, very, very quickly, a lot of organizations that don't get with the program could very easily get left behind.
Yeah.
Families and everything. So it's been kind of not left that behind when we have, we'll say, broadband electricity in every single, it's there and there's no excuses. Right now, rural it's not, can't really say it's left behind, but certainly more small rural organizations, particularly we'll say community centres that aren't resourced as through a CSP or to whatever, the ones that open for 3 hours in the evening, they don't have websites. They might have a Facebook page, but they're reaching the same people in their community that they always reached, but they're not necessarily reaching the new person in that. So we're kind of conscious of that groups and things don't get left behind. And with AI and that, you kind of need to be able to look around the corner, I was saying earlier. And how do you do that? In 10 years where, and what disadvantages will that give us? What advantages will it give us? It's unknown, but it's kind of a little bit scary. We'll all have to play ball with it, but it's kind of scary. But ultimately, it's about kind of capacity building and upskilling and that. And one thing that's very interesting is Ireland, just from the research we did in the micro project, we'll say back 10 years ago, 2015, maybe Katrina, you'll know this better than me, but 7% of Irish adults were engaged in lifelong learning. Roughly now that's 15%, which is doubled. And that's Springboard, that's everything. But Sweden, and of course would be Sweden, that's at 35%. So in order to keep a pace, everybody's going to have to kind of jump in, whether you like it or not, into learning new skills. And for half of us in our community groups and things, we can go on YouTube, we can learn it ourselves, but there's still an awful lot of people in Irish society that are more disadvantaged, that need more help. You know, they can't just kind of do it themselves. I saw that with 93-year-old
Yeah.
getting on, I just open up that quote where, yeah, so 80s, 90s, we had a 91-year-old in Clare, Galway that learned how to, you know, that people can learn, they need it, but it just has to be on their terms. And these are just disadvantaged kind of people. Yeah, the
Yeah.
community groups thing is to me, it's the two-tier community. So that community centre that opens for 2 hours, that has no paid staff, and the ones that have a, you know, a load of CE people or whatever running, you know, there's different types of community centres, and I think just making sure that the less resourced ones don't fall behind for community development in the future will be a big sort of challenge. And also as well, the final point I wanted to make really is, we think kind of a clustered approach to delivery of service for certain types of community organizations. Like there's a lot of resources, you know, there's a lot of potential in that.
Mm-hmm.
For instance, I'm kind of involved in a community training centre. We need a new website. We're trying to get the money together for a new website, but really we'd be happy to borrow a template if such a thing existed, and change the words, and you know, so as much as possible, clustered learning or clustered delivery of services in this sphere to deliver tailored products would be useful, and we think that that'll be necessary in the future. So that's it. That's me done, Emily, I think.
Thanks, Brendan. No, I think it isn't like in one of the breakout group that I was in, somebody said that there's a personal disconnection and facilitating digital connection. So I think that that's kind of an important thing to keep in mind, is that we have to be kind of thinking of different ways to help people be comfortable with the digital transformation. And a lot of the, obviously that's what we're all out here trying our best to do, and kind of trying to think of innovative ways and inclusive ways to do that. So Katrina, my last question for you is, how should organizations engage with NALA? What kind of supports do you offer?
Yeah, thanks, Emily. And yeah, I suppose just before I answer that, I think it's great to have this kind of event, and well done to yourselves for bringing everyone together and sharing information. And I'm happy to send on some links also afterwards to you to be able to share to everybody who's attended. So I suppose in terms of what NALA has to offer, we run a number of webinars which would be on areas like plain English. We also offer training, so that'll be face-to-face training as well. We have a plain English editing service. So for any organization that has a letter or document that has to go out into the public, we can look at that in more detail and help you design it. And we've had great statistics in terms of reducing the amount of calls that come in, you know, to helplines as a result of that. We have a plethora of resources that are available on our website, so that's nala.ie. If you go to tutors, there's a number of literacy and numeracy workbooks. We have guides, publications to help people in terms of plain English, also on how to get started with integrating literacy and preparing learning materials on literacy. We also offer free training to learners themselves. So if you're in an organization where you are working with people who are working at levels QQI 1 to 3, then you can sign up with us to become a centre, and we'll offer the platform too, so that you can use it for blended learning or independent learners. So if you know of anybody who would like to get a national qualification, they can sign up for free to the platform. If you're involved in prison education, we have a literacy ambassador program, and I'm happy to send on some details about that. And yeah, and then we also run a number of events. We have 4 coming up at the end of this month into November around financial literacy, literacy for social justice. So again, if you go to the NALA website and go to news and events, you can sign up for all of those free webinars as well. And as I say, I'm happy to send them on the details. But echoing, I suppose, what Mark is saying, there's so much good going on. It's great to be able to share that information and to have this kind of dialogue to get the word out there.
Yeah. Great. And yeah, we'll definitely include a lot of those supports in the follow-up. I think that'll be really valuable for people even as kind of a starting point. And then Mark, last question for you. How do people get involved with the Erasmus Plus program?
I think one of the things that's really important, first of all, is because the Erasmus Plus is broken down into different sectors. Like I've had great conversations at the Wheel Roadshows with people who are just, you know, I'm in a room with them and they're not sure where they fit in. Is it adult education? Is it vet training? Is it youth? Is it sport? Like they're trying to figure out what their groups. So I think it's really important that people actually take a bit of time to kind of look at how they communicate what their organization, the work that they do is. In-house, we all talk very like in shortcuts, you know, we speak in shorthand to each other and we're not used to communicating it to a stranger. So I think as part of like kind of doing taking on a task like that is identifying where you can fit in with the Erasmus. On the Lergus website, they have all the different sectors. You can always just send an email if you think you might fall under adult education. And as I said, that can be, you know, very informal education, like through your local libraries, men's sheds and the likes of that. But you just send an email across, you know, and the guys are great. It's how I ended up being in this role. I'm a former beneficiary. I said I came into the role like last June, and it was because of the supports that they offered. So I think once you figure that out, and then it's getting kind of going along to an info session, come along to like kind of like joint events that like, you know, we do with the likes of yourselves. And I think to Katrina, one of the things I want to say that's really important is that when we are doing these events, and you guys are great for it, it's making room for other people within the community to kind of have a voice in those spaces as well, you know. But once you have to figure it out, it's coming along to a Lergus event, it's going onto the website and seeing where you fit in, and then looking at the very simple steps. Like the next deadline for applications for funding is going to be in February and in March. So now is the time to kind of look at what you might want to do. Some people have don't know what it is they want to achieve. So go on the Apali platform, look at the work that's being done to get inspiration. Yeah. And then identify kind of what work needs to be done in your area. But yeah, get onto the Lergus website, identify your sector first of all as your first step, and take it from there. See examples of work that's being done at the moment. Talk to the organizations that are actually doing the work. I think is really important to get a very realistic and kind of honest kind of look at the work that's being done. But yeah, they're the first steps.
Great. Thanks, Mark. I just wanted to give each of you an opportunity to give any final parting words of wisdom to the audience, if you would like to. Brendan.
Well, you know, just to be fair to Lergus there, one thing that's brilliant is in Lergus, in the Erasmus projects, they have these new small scale projects, which are, I think, up to 60,000 and maybe, I think it's 4 partners or 3 possibly. But the application for those are much more manageable than the bigger ones. There's also an awful lot of handhold. You know, the Lergus staff, there isn't 100 people in there, but anybody that you reach out to will you know, be happy to help, and they generally want projects to be successful. So I think from the Irish Rural Link sort of perspective, look, digital it's transformed what it means to be living in rural Ireland. The fact that you can work, you know, that I can work, and you can see my sitting room here, and I can do my day's work, not every day, but it gives me freedom. And for us, we know that probably the best thing that came out of COVID, if we were to think of anything, is the fact that it has transformed kind of the potential of what it means to work and live and work in rural Ireland. We want to make sure that all those sort of benefits don't get lost, and that we go back to a time where people lived in rural Ireland and worked an hour away through traffic. So you know, that's kind of a priority for us. So that's, you'll see us, you know, kind of being in that space in the coming years, and just making sure that we don't kind of fall behind and we keep a pace when this sort of tap gets switched, and broadband isn't something we're arguing about, which I think is 2028, but it's sometime in that time frame, is what I believe we're being told. So that's really the last thing I can think to say. But look, we're having questions as well, I think.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. Mark, is there any kind of final words of wisdom that you have for the group?
Yeah, just a very simple one. I think we need to look at what we ask of our learners and of our community. We ask them to show up and to engage, you know, and to kind of like take on additional information and learning. And I think we need to reflect that. You know what I mean? We're asking people to engage in mobility, and we have to show that we're doing it as well. As educators, we need to show our own learning journey, because like, to take it back to a very kind of basic, simple kind of idea, probably the most influential kind of person in our lives outside of our family unit growing up was a teacher, was an educator. So we have a responsibility to live the principles, you know, and step up and do what we're asking kind of learners to do. It is, as I said, a choice at the moment. You know, adult learning is a choice. You know, engaging in Erasmus is a choice. You don't have to do it. You don't have to digitalize yourself, but it's going to come a time very soon where you do have to, when it comes to, you know, and getting learners to show up your door, staff retention and moving forward. It's not going to be a choice. And we don't end up in the same position we did, where we're forced to learn as a reactionary thing, like we were with COVID. It's like suddenly it's on top of us. It's that Japanese thing of, you know, when's the best time to plant a tree? 20 years ago. When's the next best time? Now. You know what I mean? Like, kind of like, get into it now before we're forced to do it, and enjoy it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Mark. And last word for you, Katrina.
Yeah, I'd say don't be afraid to reach out. One of the themes that came up in the breakout group that I was in was about people spending a lot of time researching, say, HR system that they're putting in, wanting to know, you know, is this the best thing? You know, are we doing the right thing? And in previous work, you know, I've heard CEOs and CIOs, you know, at the very top of, I suppose, of the IT chain, having that exact conversation. So not to be afraid. We're a small country. We're great at helping each other. Look at the likes of this event today. You know, there's great passion and enthusiasm there. And even if you reach out to somebody and they don't know, they'll find somebody else who knows. Like when we were starting out with our e-learning, our current e-learning platform, we got great help from Enterprise Ireland to give us advice. We also reached out to other organisations that were running similar services to find out how they were doing things. And sometimes it takes a few phone calls or a few emails. But yeah, if there's anybody that needs advice on an e-learning platform, feel free to reach out to me. And as I say, if I can't give you the answer, I'll surely help out. So yeah, just don't be afraid, because if you're feeling it in your organization, you can be sure that others are too. So you're not on your own on that journey.
Great. I think that's a very important message to end on. Thank you, Katrina. Thank you to all of you. So I think we'll have a look at the chat and see if there are any questions. I know we're running a little bit behind.
There is one question that was
Yeah.
posted. I would just reread it once more. And it says, are there any specific digital tools or platforms that you would recommend for NGOs looking to streamline operations and increase efficiency with limited resources? So it's about digital tools, platforms for NGOs if you want to streamline operations, but you have limited resources. I think we heard a few already, but maybe if Mark, Brandon, Katrina have some more ideas about that. Maybe you yourself are working with some.
Well, I just know that Salesforce are getting into the whole Meals and Wheels space. So yeah, I'd look those guys up. But yeah, I can't. You know, our thing really is that yeah, they'll need to be kind of tailored, and you can't tailor for just one organization. So if groups come together in the bigger organization you have, like Meals and Wheels, you know, that's because there's so many, but the more groups that can work together, you know, to look for something, the better. And just to echo the points there that Katrina was making, really for the likes of me or all of our groups, in a way, reaching out to us, you know, makes our life easier because it you know, tells us what's needed or what's requested. And you know, it's to me anyway, it's certainly, you know, people ring up and they go looking for something in Irish or like it really does make us happy because it either confirms what we're doing or it kind of points us in the direction of things we could be doing.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Salesforce is the only one that jumps to me mind.
Did either of you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I was just going to suggest there are things like low code and no code tools that you might start to hear more and more about. I know there was one, Kianda, who would look at digitizing processes. So for example, if you were putting in like annual leave requests, say within an organization, that everything could be done rather than having to write it out in a form or sending emails. It could all be done within a system that you could then design yourselves. Now that's an example of one. Like there's Power Apps, there's quite a few like that. So so yeah, if anybody wants to email me afterwards, I can look into that in a bit more. But certainly there are ways whereby, for example, if you want information in, you put it into a form and that'll automatically create a list and can give you, you know, data on that rather than putting it in, extracting it out in Excel, then filtering it and so on. So, and that came up as a theme in our breakout session as well, about that automation, just to try and, yeah, tune people's skills into other areas and to cut down a bit of time. And also it shows if there's any bottlenecks within the system as well. Yeah.
Great. Mark, any suggestions on your end?
Yeah, well, a couple of things. I think first of all, like kind of like a almost like a nationwide kind of like survey of what tools people are using would be really important. And you know, and actually to get kind of honest feedback from people about what they're using is great.
Yeah.
As before I was working on a Palais, I used the platform, and one of the things I use it as like a newspaper, except its content was all stuff that I wanted to read about. But the great thing is that when you see an article that's been written talking about, you know, tools that people are using, you can literally just click on the person's name and do that really Irish thing of being cheeky enough just to ask them.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And kind of like cut away the formality and kind of like ask, well, how did you find that? Or what are you using to achieve this thing that you've done? But I think at a national level, I think we need to kind of survey, you know, what tools are being used, you know, how do people categorize their organizations, and then and what scale they're working at and what tools that they're using. I think would be really interesting.
Yeah, that's definitely something to keep in mind for future events. I'm sure actually Liz probably has lots of thoughts on this that you might be addressing in your presentation next.
Well, I'm hoping I will absolutely address them. And thank you for the recommendation for Salesforce. I mean, that's called a CRM. And certainly a lot has been done. One of Include's big aims is to try and make it affordable for even small organizations. And we're currently developing a little suite of apps that's to help people get started very fast in a way that we weren't able to do before. So if anybody really wants to start up fast and wants to contact us, you'd be very welcome. And I know the wheel will put you in contact if that's helpful. But I will talk more about it, I promise, when I'm giving the talk, as they say.
Okay, perfect. I see there are a few kind of comments in the chat, and maybe we can address those after Liz, after your presentation, and people might have some more specific questions after that, so we can sort of save time for Q&A once you're finished with your presentation. Does that sound okay?
Yep.
Okay, so I will hand it over to you, Liz.
Oh, great. That's nice and fast.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to
Keeping it
share my
moving.
I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to hope it all works beautifully for me. So can everybody see the screen okay?
Yeah, perfect.
Yep.
I'm delighted, because this is always the fun part when you're trying to do things remotely and you're trying to make certain you're actually looking good, especially when you're meant to be doing technology and the rest. So first of all, just to say, the title of the talk, for those who don't know, is The Digital Landscape and a Roadmap to Digitalising Your Organisation. And, you know, just be aware that it's going to be different for every organisation. So Include, for those who don't know us, and many of you I know do know of us, but 2 seconds on us. So we were founded in 2006 as a charity. We are there to bridge what we call the digital divide for the nonprofit sector. So back in 2006, there really was nothing for the nonprofit sector in the same way the commercial sector had. And our founder, Eamon Stack, decided that had to change. There had to be a way that the nonprofit sector could benefit from digital solutions. So with 26 of us, and we have a combination of technical, nonprofit, and digital solution experience. So just to give an example, I've worked with UNICEF, I've worked in commercial organizations such as GE, and I'm not particularly techie, but I'm a good project manager, and that's one of my roles within Include. But we have people in there who are computer engineers. We have people in there who are experts in training. Our idea is exactly what Mark was saying earlier. We want to develop IP and share it with all nonprofits. So if we create a great solution for Irish Rural Link, for example, we want to be able to take that and share it with other nonprofits so everybody benefits. We work with TechSoup Global. We work with Salesforce. We work with Accounts IQ. They're just different platforms and donation platforms. And since we started in 2006, we've provided IT donations to over 2,000 nonprofits, and we've provided digital solutions to over 400 nonprofits. So I think we're really getting there, as they say. Mind you, every time I say that, our current CEO, Sylvester, reminds me that there's over 10,000 nonprofits in Ireland, so I have quite a way to go. So just to move on, that's just a few of our current clients. There's many, many, many more, but as you see, we work with a lot of different types of organization, but I really don't want to talk about us for too long. So what we're really talking about is the current digital landscape and then your roadmap or a possible roadmap to digitalization. So the digital landscape, well, as you probably know, it's got more and more complex over the last number of years. You'll probably remember the happy days where you had to go shopping in person, but now you go to Amazon. You remember the happy days when there wasn't social media to worry about, and now you have to worry about it. But the commercial organizations have taken huge advantage of this. And they've taken huge advantage in a couple of ways. They've made us do the work. So we now book our tickets online for Ryanair. We do our banking online for the Bank of Ireland. But they also gather our data, and that can be good and that can be bad. But the tools they are using can be used for good in the nonprofit organization. So if we look a little more, I just want to scare you for a second. So there's a law called Moore's Law, and that says that every 2 years, the hardware, the processors that are used to run all our digital stuff, double in their strength, in their way of working. And what is true of hardware is actually true of software. So if you look at this particular graph, I think this one is very, very interesting. You can see how long it took these particular platforms to reach 1 million users. And if you go to the top, there's Netflix, and that took 40 months. You've Twitter, it took 23 months, 24 months. Facebook only took 10 months. Instagram took about 3 months. ChatGPT which is one of the AI tools. It's not the only AI tool, but it's one of the AI tools. Took about a month. And that is the speed at which the digital landscape is moving at the minute. So you may kind of go and say, well, yeah, that's all very well, but AI isn't going to touch us for a while yet. So let me give you an example of how AI is being used today in social work. And I came across this article in the Guardian newspaper. So the link is there, and we'll be sending out the slides if you want to read the whole piece. But currently at the minute, there are hundreds of social workers in England who have begun using an artificial intelligence system that records conversations, it drafts letters to doctors, and it actually proposes actions that human workers may not have considered. And it's being trialled at the minute in 7 councils. It's sitting on social workers' phones to record and analyse face-to-face meeting. It writes almost instant summaries and it suggests follow-up actions. And the good news, absolutely the good news, is that social workers are spending less time taking notes and filling out reports. The bad news is all that data, where's it going? Who's analysing it? And if we're using AI in this context, do we lose the human-centric touch? Do we decide to accept or ignore a proposed action? There are many, many thoughts to have. But if we're talking about digital landscape, even in the non-profit social enterprise sector, it's just something we all have to be aware of. But maybe let's go backwards to today's world just for a minute. I think that might be a little more comforting. And I want to just say for a second that it doesn't have to be that scary. The digital landscape doesn't have to worry you as much as when I say AI. So you could think of dividing it up into almost different parts of the landscape. You have your productivity tools, and I saw a note going in on chat and how wonderful Microsoft Office was, and it is. It's great. You can have collaboration tools. So today we're on Zoom, but there's so many other ones. There's service delivery options, and I'd include CRM as part of that. There's mobile apps, so we don't even have to be in the office when we're using our digital tools. There's governance, and like CRM again, and there's financial packages, there's board software. And I'd also include there at the bottom what I would call sectoral solutions. So we talked earlier about how could we, as small organizations, actually produce solutions, do digitalization as individual organizations? And I think the answer is maybe not. You don't have to. There's always going to be big organizations that can afford to digitalize on their own. But I genuinely think that there are organizations who are better banding together. So for example, we've produced sectoral solutions for the addiction services, and that's ECAS, for domestic violence services, eSafe, traveller services, that's called eTrav, and even for the PPNs, the public participatory networks. So I think there's a huge, huge, huge amount to be said about collaboration. You don't have to do it on your own. And I think that's a very, very important thing to remember. I want to talk for a second about how digitalization helped one organization. And I'm going to give this as an example. Now, this case study is sitting on our website, so I know my friends in Dublin, Simon, don't mind me telling the story. But it's a good example of how they had a problem and how a digital solution solved it. So this was Dublin Simon's mission. I'm sure all of you know them. They want to support people to exit homelessness, access and retain homes, and rebuild their lives by delivering housing, health and well-being services. One part of the work they do is through an outreach team. So these are people who are going onto the streets every night and helping those who are sleeping rough. And they have a contract, as you do, with the Dublin Regional Homeless Executive, Housing Executive. And they have to fulfill certain SLAs within that. As nonprofits, we all know what fun SLAs from funders can be. So one of the things they had to fulfill was if they got an alert from the DRHE, they had to respond within a certain time frame. And they also had to say how many times they tried to respond within a particular time frame. And it was very, very difficult for staff who weren't meant to be in the office to get the alerts, to go to the place, to respond and to report on what they were doing. And a huge amount of time was spent in administration, and that was time that could have been used in helping the people who really needed the help. And the poor outreach manager was demented by the amount of time it was taking him to report in to the DRHE, because he was managing a staff of, I think it was maybe 10 people at that stage. So what happened there was we decided that each of the outreach workers had a phone that was supplied by Dublin Simon. So there was no issues there. They had something they could communicate with. And we developed a little app that sat on their phone that fed into, wait for it, a Salesforce CRM. I said I'd mention Salesforce. And as they worked, they could see the referrals coming in. And they could see a color-coded traffic light system that showed the status of each client. They could see, using the wonders of GPS technology, where the rough sleeper was. They could respond to the alert and they could update the contact attempt status. And this meant that the outreach manager could actually see what was happening with each alert. He could see what had been responded to. He could report on the work that had been done and on everything that he had to, both for the DRHE and for Dublin Simon management team itself. So a huge amount of time was saved. Staff reached rough sleepers faster. Staff spent less time on administration. It was quicker to train the new staff, because that had been one of the worries, but actually the new app made it easier to train them. It was easier for staff to see when they were needed. There was hugely improved communications between people on the team. And time and effort was spent that, most importantly, could be spent with those who actually needed it. So that is an example of how digitalisation helped a nonprofit. So what actually led to success? Why did this succeed? Because there would have been an awful lot of things that could have gone wrong with this. I won't list all of those, but this is essentially why it succeeded. And the first was it was co-designed to support and drive the mission of Dublin Simon. So a lot of time was spent talking to the staff members of who were going to use it and finding out the best way to put it into the app. We even were hoping to get a user group together from the clients. That one didn't materialize. It was too difficult for Dublin Simon. But it is something I think that would have even added more to the project if we could have done it. It was adaptable. It was accessible. So anywhere in Dublin, happily we don't have the broadband issues most of the time in Dublin. You might still have down in the country. So that meant it was online the whole time. It was affordable and it was appropriate for what it was needed for. And maybe the last thing to say, it wasn't standalone. It wasn't something Include developed because this was one small thing that could help Dublin Simon. It was part of an overall digital strategy that Dublin Simon wanted to create to help their work. One of the reasons it was helpful for them was because it was built on cloud technology. Now, happily these days, most people are no longer afraid of data being up in the cloud. We are fortunate in Europe that GDPR is extremely strong and that cloud technology data centers are very heavily monitored. We can talk a bit about what we think about data centers in Ireland, maybe not today, but in essence, because of where we are and because of EU law, data in data centers is very secure. Because it's cloud technology, it's also secure because it's far harder for people to hack if it's set up properly. It generally provides much more cost and time savings than if you put something on a server in the office. And the nice thing about it is it also integrates with other services. So for example, often we're asked, can you take information from the web into an application? And the answer is yes. So people will ask us, well, can we get people to give money on the website and can it all go in to the overall CRM? And that's easy to do. And people ask, can I get people to register for events on my website and it all to go into the CRM? And yes, that's easy to do. The advantage of cloud architecture in the digital landscape is it makes things much more accessible and in general, much more secure. And it's cheaper than having servers sitting in your office that you have to pay somebody to maintain. If we're talking digitalisation in general, these are what we would generally call the big benefits. Okay, and they're very general headings, but if you're starting to think, well, why do I bother? This is what I would generally say. The first is that it supports process management and data management. So that means it manages to record what you're doing and ensuring it gets done. And there's a record for that if you're looking at governance. But it also protects the data you are recording and allows you to report on it. One of the main reasons we actually put it in for a lot of people like Dublin Simon is they want to be able to see the interactions they have with their clients. Often people have several teams who could be working with a client. They may have a counsellor, they may have a key worker, they may even have a medical team, and they want everybody to have this 360-degree view of the client while still protecting the pieces of data that they don't want certain members of certain teams to see. So for example, you may not want the nurse to see the key worker's notes. You may not want the key worker to see the medical notes. But the point is there's a single point that everything is stored. So it's a single source of truth. We have discovered it hugely reduces admin time. Now, there is a learning curve. With everything, there is a learning curve. Digitalization takes time, it takes effort, it takes support. But when it's adopted well, and when there's good change management in place, it will reduce admin time. It's key in that it provides data for reporting and it shows the evidence of the work that has been done. And this is more and more key for funders. They want to see the numbers. Now, it can record qualitative as well as quantitative data. There's no issue with that. But as we are all seeking funding, as we are all needing to prove what we are doing and the outcomes, systems digitalization becomes more and more key. And again, I've already talked about GDPR security. Having a good digital system can enhance that immensely. So, a roadmap to digitalizing your organization. I've come up with some headings here rather than giving you a 3-point plan because every organization is going to be different. Every organization has different needs, different purposes, but just these are some headings you might want to think about. And again, Include would be extremely happy if anybody wanted to reach out to them and have a conversation about this. So feel very free to do that. First thing I'm going to say is digitalization starts with a single step. I know that sounds very obvious. Genuinely, I know that sounds very obvious. And it doesn't mean you have to do everything at once. I would say most of the people here, because you're on Zoom and because of the types of organizations you're already ticking productivity and you're already ticking collaboration. And that has become part of your digitalization. And then you may want to think, well, what's the next step? And that could be service delivery solutions. It could be governance. It could be advocacy. There's so many things that can be so helpful. And again, I think it's really good to talk sectorally. What do we need? What does our sector need? What are the challenges our sector are going to be looking at in the next while? One of the things we've developed, as I was saying earlier, as Include, is an app, and we're calling it eStart, because we realize that for many people, CRM, which is just a posh way of saying database, but it stands for client relationship management, is scary. And we wanted to make a first step easy for people to adopt. And it strips away some of the complex stuff. It leaves you with the simple stuff, but it lets you build on that as your journey progresses. So I would thoroughly recommend that people consider simple steps. The projects I hate, I really hate these ones, are where somebody says, I'm going to do everything at once. And they come to me and they say, Elizabeth, in 3 months' time, I want X, Y, Z, and I want it to do everything and to cover all aspects of my organization and to link to my finances and to make the coffee as well, please. No IT project that has that level of ambition is going to work. It's a question of establishing the steps. And again, to state the blooming obvious, plan. You need to think, where are you now? So what stage are you at? Are you at the productivity stage? Are you leaning towards a governance stage? Are you at an operational stage? Where are you now? Okay. If you are going to go digital at whatever point you are, or you're going to increase your digital journey or go further in your digital journey, what are going to be the distractions and the dangers and the potholes? And the reason I say that is that it's not a good time to do a giant IT project at the same time as you're doing another big organizational change, perhaps. So sometimes the two fit very well together. You're changing your processes. How can digitalization help with that? But sometimes I've gone into organizations where they're changing their processes. They want digitalization, but in us putting in the digitalization, the change management part while they were changing the processes was too big. So is this the right moment to take the next digital step? Okay. And then look at, where do you plan to be? Where would you like to be in 2026, 2027? Would you like to have a CRM? Would you like your board members perhaps to be able to do all their signatures online? Would you like all of your volunteers to be able to fill in a form online to say when they're available? What would you like? Dream a bit. Second thing, again, it's nicely obvious, bring people on board. I know, I'm stating the obvious, but I've gone into too many organizations where people are almost the last thing people think about. And I genuinely think that's wrong. People are going to be nervous. And it isn't just those over 80s who are going to be nervous. Sometimes the over 80s are the most flexible and open for change. But people are going to be nervous if you put something in place where they think it's going to take over their job. They don't think they have the skills. They feel that they're not being included in the design. Bring the people on board. So look at the people, the data, the devices, and the applications. And again, I'm dividing that into 4 groups. Okay, so just to go through that briefly. So look at the people who are going to be affected by the digitalization or the new digital strategy or whatever you're doing yourself. Look at the staff. Will digitalization definitely help their work? What kind of guidelines and policies are you going to have to put into place? Look at the clients. How can digitalization help your interactions with clients and measure outcomes? But also, how could digitalization give more control to your clients? So by that, I mean, is there ways that your client can receive feedback? Your client can perhaps get a passport every month that says how much progress they have made. Are they comfortable with that? Would they like to sit with a key worker and fill in a form online? Or would they really rather sit with the paper version of the form? How can you bring your clients on board if they're not at the stage yet? How are you going to measure the outcomes for the services you provide? Do you have that in place already? Or is that something that you're going to have to design? Donors. How can you help your donors give? How can you make that journey easier for them? How can you reach out to them? How can you encourage them? How can you see the paths that they may be on? How can you see which ones are approachable now? Funders, what do they want? How do they want to be reported to? Is it simply that they just want some figures? Do they want outcome measurements? Do they want to see anonymized data? What do they need? Lots and lots of questions, all related to people, and people are important. Data. Data is one of the most valuable things that we collect as organizations because it helps us see the path we're on. It helps us see the improvements we're making in our services and in the lives of our service users. So it's really important when we're designing systems and when we're looking to digitalize that we do look at how we're going to be treating data. What kind of validation rules are we going to put in place so that we're sure our data is accurate? And this is a huge one, for example, for the addiction services. They have to have validation rules that are in place because the HRB demand them. And I think there's about 200 of those at the minute. that say, if this bit of data is this, then these other bits of data are either required, or they may be valid, or they may not be valid. But it's all around, is my data valid? What kind of quality checks are you going to put into place? Are you going to have somebody who's responsible for checking the quality of the data that you're putting into your system? Because it's rubbish in, rubbish out. You could put in the best systems in the world, and you could end up with a pile of rubbish coming out of them if you don't do the quality checks. Is the data going to be accessible? Who is it going to be accessible to? What rules can we put in place to make certain that it's only accessible to those people? What is GDPR saying here? Is it going to be secure? If you're still thinking of putting a server in your office, you're going to have to think of how secure is it going to be there? Is it going to be secure against natural disaster or theft? Is it going to be secure against viruses? What kind of measures are you going to put in place? If you're thinking of software as a service, you're going to tick a lot of those boxes. Cloud software is more secure generally than servers in the office, but it's still a question you should be asking. How secure is my data going to be? And banner at the bottom, data protection is a legal obligation. So it's not something that is optional. It's something we all have to think about, whether we're doing it whether we're using digital systems or just pen and paper. Devices. So have a look at the minute. What do you currently use in your organization? Okay. Most of us have moved to laptops from PCs, but I still go into organizations and there's PCs on the desks. Are there laptops? Are they owned by the organization, or are they owned by the person who's using it? And I would say that you shouldn't have people working for your organization on their own laptops, because that is a digital risk. Mobile phones, we talked about the Dublin Simon app, and mobile phones can actually be a very powerful force for good in digitalization for an organization. But again, if you're asking staff members to use phones for business, you should really be providing them with their own phones. Because at that point, if you have much more control about the security that's going to go on those phones. And if a staff member leaves, the phone can be wiped, for example, or it'll be returned. But it gives you more security. And then you can look at other things such as servers if you really want them, or printers. But do a hardware audit. What do you already have? And you don't have to record everything, but as a minimum, where it's appropriate, the operating system, what security you're using for each of the systems, and what user protocols are in place, what the device can be used for, and what it can't be used for. So this is very important if you are giving out equipment to staff members. Okay, and it's just something to keep aware of. Sometimes we're asked to go into an organization and do what we call a discovery project, and we're asked to look at all of the software that they're using and to give some advice. And it's always very interesting. And one of the first things we do is we ask for a list of what people are using. And I think my record so far is for an organization that was using, I think it was 40 different applications, and they hadn't realized they were spending 76,000 a year in licensing fees, because it was dripping out through different departments. They were using multiple versions of meeting software. They were using multiple versions of design software, all of which was being paid for. Nothing was very big, but added together, it was a huge overall budget for the organization. So look at what you've purchased. What's the reason for it? What other things do people have on company machines that you haven't approved? I know that sounds very big brotherish, but genuinely, if it's a company machine, the only software that should be on it is stuff that you have said should be on it. It shouldn't just be something somebody saw and decided they were going to download and have a go at. Decide what functionality you actually need, okay? And decide, does it have to be available everywhere? Can it just be available on a single machine? Does it have to be available for everyone? And again, make certain it's going to be secure. Look at updates and patches, and look at remote disabling. So again, we're looking at worst possible scenarios. We're looking at when you want to disable somebody from a system. And this is back again to what I was saying about company machines for company work. It's much easier to do all of that in that particular case. And again, I really recommend that people look at cloud software and software as a service rather than trying to create their own bespoke systems or trying to host stuff on servers in offices. Really, that age has gone unless it's for a really good reason. I'm going to suggest you write some user stories, okay? Now, user stories are a great way of people trying to describe what they want systems to do. So I'm going to give you a couple of examples. So you might say, as a CEO, I want to see all of the annual leave for the organization so that I can ensure I have enough cover. Okay, that would be a very simple user story. You might say another one could be, as a service manager, I want to see all of the clients that we are helping so that I can make sure they've all been assigned a key worker. This is a really good way. We can give loads more examples, but I'm conscious of time. This is a really good way of actually deciding what you want your systems to do, because you're looking again at the people and you're saying, these are the people who are going to be using the systems. These are the people who are going to be benefiting from the systems. I want to look at how the systems are going to help them. So that is a very helpful way of doing that. And we do that now for all systems that we put in. Partner with others. I keep saying this again and again and again. Partner with others. I think the most successful projects we have done are when a group of organizations have come together to work with us, because they feed off each other, they spark off each other. And it is so helpful then because they feel supported within that. There's nobody who's afraid of asking questions because they're all at the same level. The costs end up being reduced. And if you're reporting then as a group, you're reporting using the same measurements. So for example, when we designed the system for the domestic violence services, eSafe, we worked with them, and I think it took the first year to design the system, never mind implement it, just designing it, to make certain everybody was comfortable with how data was going to be recorded and how data was going to be reported. Because that meant that they could say to government, we're all working in the same way, we're reporting on our data in the same way. This is where you have issues. And when you collaborate as a sector to digitalise, I really, really, really believe it's a powerful force. It's really a very powerful force. So we're nearly there. I promise you we're nearly there. I think these are really important success factors if you're looking at doing anything. Make certain you have sponsorship right at the top. You won't get anywhere unless you have that. Make certain you appoint an internal lead. Doesn't have to be the boss. Make certain there's time allocated for training and getting used to the new system, time allocated for supporting the users, time to plan for changes, because people will use the system and then they'll want some changes because nothing is ever perfect at the start. And make certain there's going to be somebody who will give you support and engagement with the ongoing digital journey, whoever that is. It doesn't have to be included. Of course, we're delighted if it is. But whoever you would choose for that particular piece, make certain they will support you in an ongoing way, because otherwise it can be a system that's there and is never used. But finally, it's a journey.
Is for okay, so have a question here. Any funding or grants available?
Not specifically from Include, but we have worked, well, I'm going to, that's a lie, that's a lie. Absolutely, we run the donations program for Include as well, and that provides much reduced costs for things like Microsoft Office and for many other pieces of software. So we are TechSoup representatives in Ireland, and we would be delighted if people wanted to look at our website, see what was available, and then we can help you with that. But we don't give grants out specifically ourselves for work. What we have done in the past is if people wanted to start a digital journey and they had a funder in mind, we have helped them complete funding applications, you know, giving them an idea of costs, that kind of thing.
Great, thank you, Liz.
I just come in there for a second. On that, there's obviously the Training Fund that Emily and the Wheel will tell you about. But in the summer, the new social enterprise policy that came out, they've kind of made a recommendation that SkillNets look at opening up to the social enterprise sector. That'll take a bit of lobbying, and it'll take social enterprises coming together and at a minimum showing that there's a demand for that. So I think possibly, yeah, that could well be a stream that isn't there this minute, but that'll substantially pay towards whatever level of training is necessary. And I was delighted to see that Elizabeth's presentation really, the stuff I was thinking about in terms of change management and that was very much there as well. So if anybody's interested, there's a pretty good module inside in our Micro 2 Digital Erasmus project that basically gives you a 1-hour introduction to managing change in your organization. It's designed that'll take that length of time, so it's a sort of a starting place for people. But yeah, change management is really, it's more about that than the technical stuff from our end anyway.
Yeah, great. We can share that in the follow-up, Brendan, if you want to send me on the link. But yeah, and I should also mention, yeah, we have the Training Links program, and I think it's closed for the year, probably open up again next year, but it's about exactly what Liz suggested, which is groups of nonprofit organizations coming together to kind of get funding for a shared objective. So maybe that's looking at developing digital strategies for their organizations, for their communities, that kind of thing. So we can definitely share information the next time that our Training Links program opens up. Okay, I'm just gonna check and see. Are there any other questions? Does anybody want to come on mic to ask a question? There are just kind of a few comments about different sort of systems that people use. But if there are no other questions, The only other thing that I wanted to say is just to encourage people to come along to our event on the 30th of October. So that's the digital transformation and the sector event that we'll have. And that'll be about looking at the results of the consultation today. And we're also we're basically running this same event again on the 23rd. And so we'll look at the results from the consultation from today and the 23rd. We'll present them at the event on the 30th and kind of look at the big trends emerging from those consultations. So probably things like the skills needs, the funding needs in particular, and the logistics of kind of setting up a digital strategy for your organization. So as I said, we'll send on the slides and the recording and kind of relevant links that people have mentioned today. So just really a big thank you to all of you for attending and engaging with this process, for your interest, to our panelists and our speakers, and to my colleagues, Christina and Matthew, for helping to deliver this event. And we hopefully will see you all on the 30th. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Great.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
I'm just going to go ahead and end it.
Yeah, thanks. See you
Okay.
soon,
See you.
Emily,
Bye.
Christina.